Well, hello there, humans, hippies, earthlings, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and whoever you're lucky enough to be doing it to. I'm Bushka on Blitz, and I'm here today to have a little bit of a chat with you about some French fare. The AMX AC 46. This is the Tier 7 French tank destroyer from the new French TD line. And it's been a bit of a controversial line, and I'll get to exactly why that is in just a wee while. I want to talk about what the tank can actually do in terms of both positives and negatives. I want to talk a little bit about the play style I'd suggest for the tank, some of the things you can do to minimize its issues, and I also want to talk about a little bit of an overview of an issue I have personally with the way this line's been implemented and the way it's been balanced and the way a lot of things work in the game itself. So without further ado, let's kick off. Just before we do, obviously, please subscribe to the channel. And if you'd consider sponsoring, there's a link there. You can become a patron. I do a weekly podcast for the patrons, and I do a weekly video only for the patrons as well. So there you go. This is a reasonably good tank. It's not a really good tank. And as my mate Snake Eyes would tell you, if I'm saying it's a solid tank, don't drive it. But it's a tank that you can grind through to get to your end result without pulling your hair out. Is it a tank that is going to be a keeper after you've finished? I don't really think so. And there's a couple of things against it that really stand out. One is the gun, while it performs adequately, it doesn't seem to live up to the numbers that it has on paper. And the second thing that really kills this tank is its armour is just bog awful. I'm going to show you a little glimpse of the PC version of the tank's armour because Armour Inspector didn't have the up-to-date French line yet. No knock on the boy at Armour Inspector or the boys. They do a really good job, and it's one of the things along with Blitz. Blitz Star is the tank compare tool there that I use extensively. And if you are thinking of putting a little bit in the community, Sock Robber, aka Dave, he runs Blitz Stars and he does an awesome job. So go and check that out. That's where I compare a lot of tank stats. This tank is quick. It gets up to 50 kilometers an hour. It has 43 degrees of traverse with all the bells and whistles. And it certainly is no slouch in handing out damage. In fact, amongst tier 7 TDs, it's very much in the ascendancy. It's 2,831 damage per minute, which is up towards the top end, behind some of the Russians and the E25 and the like, but it also has a lovely 202 millimeters of pen on its 100 millimeter AC SA47. And like a lot of the TDs, it also has a very reasonable array of stock guns as well. But it's massive. Have a look at the size of the thing. The Panther just drove past us, and we were bigger than the Panther. We dwarfed the E25 that Swiss Chisel's running around in, and it looks wider than SU100Y. And this is where my real issue is. When you have a look at this in Armour Inspector, albeit with the PC versions, you're going to see you've got about 150 millimeters of armour on the front of the tank. 160, 168 at best. And then you've got these two huge boobs on top that run at about 100 millimeters each. And you only got 7 degrees of gun depression either side as well, gun traverse either side as well, which is very poor. 40 millimeters of armor on the side and 40 millimeters of armor sloped on the back. Here's the big issue. It's huge. It's enormous. It's got 10 degrees of gun depression. So if you had a T25 AT, for instance, you could reverse up here and duck back like I'm doing now, and you wouldn't be visible behind that hill, because you wouldn't be huge. And certainly the parts that were visible would be quite well armoured. This thing is an enormous giant tank, and it's got very poor frontal armour. And then on top of its very poor frontal armour, it has 2 enormous weak points. And this raises something that for me is always perplexing. I don't have a problem with anime tanks or fantasy tanks, as some people like to call them, because I just enjoy things that are well designed and balanced, and I enjoy the competitive gameplay, and this is certainly a challenging tank. But I don't understand if you can put an anime tank in and balance the armor based on an arbitrary set of rules that the developers run by, why you can't twist or fiddle history a bit and lower the enormous, massive weak points that all the French tanks seem to have for no apparent reason. There's like, they are weak armor-wise almost universally all the way up to this tank. And this is a step up in the armor stakes, but it gets better again at 8, 9, and 10. Yet this thing is big as a house and has these two huge bugger-off things that are pennable by HE on various tanks when you get up-tiered in Tier 8. It's just horrific. And the idea being with this tank that you're going to play it as a gun depression fast mover that can get out behind the mediums and such. But you're going to see whenever I'm matched up against, like, look at that E25. It's hilarious. I'm the biggest tank on my team and I'm a lightly armoured TD. If I'm this bloody big and I've got a good horsepower to ton ratio, I should have more armour. And that's my big issue. I'd love to see the tank fixed up armour-wise so that this is, don't get me started, this is like with the E5. The E5 I find to be very competitive and it's a good tank. It's not a ratings kind of tank, but it does fairly well. And I've really enjoyed driving it. But why do you need to have such a weak point on the turret? The Type 61, the STA1, why do you have these really weak tanks and then give them huge bugger off couplers on top of everything else that make them easy to hit again, and yet you give these other tanks everything armor-wise and don't give them any weak points on top at all? Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. So I'd love to see the armor improved on this, most notably because this line was not neutered, but it was very much made less unique and interesting when they didn't bring autoloaders into the game with the French TDs. That was on PC. For all reports, their very much defining characteristic, their singular victory in PC was their autoloader, and that hasn't translated across to Blitz, and that's fair enough. The powers that be decided it would be unbalanced and they didn't want to roll with that. But if that's the case, surely if you've removed that autoloader component, you'd have to give them a little bit of a head up in the armor stakes. So it's got bad armor. It is good mobile tanking right now. Like, this is a good mobile tank. It will get out there, it will do 50 Ks, it will run around. It's got very nice pen. It will do 2800 DPM. It's got 10 degrees of gun depression. You can get shots off. And for that reason, it's competitive enough. But you're going to see when I try and reverse up here, it's so enormous. There is just no leeway. It bumbles around the map running into things. And that's a problem. In a game where I've often said the best armor is not being seen, it's the biggest tank on the map. And that's horrible. One of the things the Russian heavies do so well is not just have really, really good armor. You get to tier 10, you've got the IS-4s and the IS-7s and the like. They're also incredibly easy to hide behind obstacles. And that's something that I feel like this tank should be able to do. Now, I'm going to be doing reviews on the tier 9, 10, the 8, and they all have the same issue with the massive rangefinders. You can see on the left-hand side of the tank there, and the commander's hatch. But it's less of a problem when you're a smaller or a lower profile tank, because it's easier to hide them. And it's also easier to get the angle up to the point where you don't actually get penetrating shots and use the gun depression. No, it doesn't mean that you can't drive the tank. You can, but I mean, I've gone on about it long enough. I don't like the armor. There are a couple of other things to talk about. One of them is a traditionally big problem for a lot of TDs, and that's the fact that there's not a lot of gun traverse left and right. Like, you've got 7 degrees left and 10 degrees right, which is really odd, but it's a characteristic that you're going to see on a lot of the other French tanks. Now, usually the higher that gun traverse number is dictated by, well, it's not usually, but quite often you get lighter armored tanks, like say the tier 6 French tank destroyer, the bathtub. That's a pretty cool tank. It's got 29 degrees of gun traverse on the right and 15 degrees on the left. Sorry, the tier 5. And that's pretty odd, but it allows you to hide most of your tank and actually get shots off around corners almost, which is really important. And it's something that you come to value when you've got it. It's one of the reasons why the Tortoise was always a bit of a giggle fest as far as I was concerned, because it has 20 degrees of gun arc either side of the gun. The AC MLE 46 has 10 degrees at best to the right, which can be off-putting. So what you really need to do is set the tank up so that you're facing your tank at an angle to the left, and you can take full advantage of the gun traverse to the right to get shots off and set shots up. That gives you 3 degrees more than the other way around. But the problem is obviously when you're adjusting with very short traverse arcs, and it should be noted that that is not tremendously under the odds for tier 7 TDs. There's some horrible ones like the Stura Emil has 5 degrees and 7 degrees. The YAG has 13 degrees either side. Most of the others tend to have around 8 degrees either side. E25 has 12 because obviously it needs all the help it can get. Sorry if I sound bitter there. It does have 10 degrees of gun depression, which is good. But what that means is when you move, you're going to see when I'm aimed in here and I'm zoomed in and I'm like absolutely ready to go. That line there shows you how far you can traverse left or right and where you are in the arc. So I'm actually pointing around to the right at the moment, and I can go to right on the edge of my screen. But as soon as I hit that, well, of course, then the gun arc gets, the actual reticle gets bigger and things are a bit tougher. So TDs, while they often have really, really good numbers, like this is 0.317 dispersion, while they often have really, really good numbers like that, they're not as accurate as, say, a Leo or an E50 or something like that with really good gun numbers, because they have to carry through with that dispersion while moving, and that makes the aim time a lot bigger, and it kills things. So what do you do with the tank? Well, use the mobility, get out to a flank, and do your best. Try not to get isolated like I have been here. I mean, I did my best not to get isolated. I was going to have a go at the team for not covering this flank at all at the start. And then I thought, what's the point? I'll just go and do it myself and not carry on about it. Otherwise, why become part of the problem when you can be part of the solution? When it hits, the gun is excellent, and it's got good pen numbers, and if you're patient with it, you'll do a lot better. You'll see I rush a couple of shots here when it's not completely zoomed in, and that just goes randomly into the side. I really love that feature where you get hit and you see how much damage was incoming, because that was 160 alpha, which means it was a 75mm gun, which gives me a good idea on who was firing at me. I think that is absolutely brilliant. I really like that. That's something that a lot of people have picked up on yet, that the caliber of shell can tell you whether another tank is stock or if they're running an odd gun if you bounce a shot from them. You're going to see here again, I shoot early and the track gets messed up. So you want to get out on the flanks with this. Like most of the French TDs, it's fast enough to relocate and move around the field, and that's all well and good. I was a little bit hard on it when I first got it. I really didn't like it at all. I drove it a bit more, and I found that you've just got to be patient with it. You really do, and it will fulfill, it will get the job done. But if you just drive hard at it, you're going to usually come a cropper. 310 is your average alpha on your AP. Your APCR is, I think, about 250mm a pen, which isn't ideal, but you rarely need it. 202mm a pen is excellent. Like, you can pen pretty much everyone you're coming across with 202mm a pen, and that's as it should be, because 202mm a pen is a fair chunk of change. Now, we've got 2 caps here at the moment, and you can see I've basically, they've not capped A, so I'm holding my powder dry until they actually do. And then I'm going to go over there eventually and cap B, but I was too slow. Got the kill in the end on the SU-122-54. but didn't get the kill on the T21. He just kept it out. Things not to do with this tank. Be in the front line. You're going to take damage. It's like driving a Leo or an RU-251 or any of those kind of tanks. If you get involved in a hit point trade, you don't really have any mechanisms to mitigate incoming damage. You're going to get hit. And if you expose the sides of this tank, they're 40 millimeters. That means you will get HE spanked. Do not expose the sides. Follow mediums, follow heavies. Try to play with someone who is either in a very, very fast tank that you can get around with because you are very, very fast, or a big, big heavy tank that you can leverage off. It's not a keeper, but it's doable, and it probably has enough quality guns in stock that you can get through without pulling your hair out. I'm going to do the other French TDs very shortly, so keep an eye out. I'm going to do a little bit of an overview of patch 4.1 tomorrow when I do the stream. I'll put a stream up. Make sure you watch that. And I think 8, 9, and 10 are going to be better than the 7, to be honest. I really do. The tier 10 one has been low-key solid. I've seen a lot of guys. I've seen Austin Grimes driving it all the time on ratings battles. He's a good player on the Asia server, and he's always running around in that Foch. Podcast coming out. That should be cool. There's a patron-only podcast up right now. Go and look at it. I did it on Monday. If you haven't listened to that one, go and listen to that. There is a patron-only video coming out. Go and listen to that. I'm also been talking to some of the guys, and I'm going to do a series that people can refer brand spanking new players to, and it's going to be very, very short and sharp. It's going to be side scraping, hull down, camouflage, and loadout. And it's going to be those things, and I'm going to do it in 4 separate parts, give you like 5-minute videos, and they will be absolutely on point. And that way, when someone comes into the game, you can give them this playlist, and bang, they'll be able to go into the field of battle, and they'll have a lot better idea on what's going on than, you know, unfortunately, the learning curve, which is pretty steep at the moment. We've got a lot of new players coming into the game. It is really steep, you know. That's why the channel was started, to help the humans. And I'd like to have something out there that's specifically aimed at brand new players. So look out for that as well. And make sure you refer people to it when it drops. I'm Bushka on Blitz. You guys are bloody lovely. Don't listen to the haters. Stay strong. And until next time, stay safe on the battlefield.